Imagine that you were able to go back in time, back in the 2025 regular season, and you had the chance to ask Denver Nuggets coach Michael Malone what he'd like to change about the team's roster entering the playoffs. He probably would have answered something like A. A proper backup center to help during the non-Nikola Jokic minutes, B. A more reliable starter who could provide better effort on both ends, C. A real veteran shooter off the bench, and D. A player from their championship run like Braun. Well, Michael Malone was obviously fired right before the playoffs began, but if those things really happened to be his wishes, then it feels like all of them definitely came true this offseason. First off, the Nuggets traded longtime starter Michael Porter Jr. and a 2032 first-round pick for forward Cam Johnson in a move that saved $17 million annually off Denver's payroll over the next 2 years. In addition, Denver also dumped the contract of non-rotational player Dario Saric by acquiring big man Jonas Valanciunas. Then off the free agent market, the Nuggets also signed sharpshooting veteran Tim Hardaway Jr. to a one-year minimum deal, while also actually bringing back 2023 championship piece Braun also on a one-year minimum contract. Well, sure, as reported, newly acquired big man Jonas Valanciunas is planning to leave the NBA for Europe, but even if Valanciunas actually does leave, the Nuggets can still grab a decent backup center on the free agent market with the cap space that Valanciunas' buyout will open up. What's even more impressive is, entering the offseason, the Denver Nuggets actually didn't have a lot of options to improve a flawed roster. They didn't have cap space to sign big names off the free agent market, and they also only had one first-round draft pick that they could use in a trade. But thanks to the creativity of new front office tandem Ben Tenzer and Jonathan Wallace, in the blink of an eye, Denver went from having no depth to actually having a lot. In the process, they were also able to move away from the dreaded second apron while still having some breathing room left to improve their roster in the coming weeks. So in this video, let's talk about what the Denver Nuggets did to reshape their roster around Nikola Jokic during the first 48 hours of free agency to make it back to championship contender status. So let's get to it. First off, for Denver, all of the financial implications and flexibility that come with the Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Johnson trade are definitely just bonuses, because those things would barely matter if Cam Johnson wasn't a solid fit in Denver. Good thing is, he actually looks like a perfect fit with what the Denver Nuggets need in their starting lineup. Sure, MPJ and Johnson are both combo forwards who shot over 39% from deep and averaged just under 19 points per game last season, but overall, MPJ actually being a consistent third scorer behind Jokic and Murray was something that never really materialized in Denver. Well, of course, MPJ is still young and he still might have a ton of untapped ability as an on-ball scorer, but I think if he was going to have that opportunity in Denver, it would have already happened last season. And overall, the Denver Nuggets simply aren't on a timeline that can afford MPJ large amounts of on-ball reps every game. Meanwhile, Cam Johnson should slide right in for Denver as a plug-and-play shooter and slasher who's also got much better playmaking chops than MPJ. Last season in Brooklyn, Johnson was asked to shoulder a heavier load on offense, and he actually improved his output by averaging 5.4 more points per game than he did in 2024, while also improving his true shooting by 5 percentage points. Meaning, he didn't sacrifice scoring efficiency even while playing for a Brooklyn team that didn't have stars to create gravity for him, leaving him to provide that gravity for the team. So you can just imagine how much more effective Johnson can become alongside the gravity of the best playmaker in the world in Nikola Jokic, as well as the secondary pull of Jamal Murray. So in Denver, aside from being just a spot-up shooter, expect Cam Johnson to be asked to do a lot of secondary shot making, especially off closeouts, which is where his strength mostly lies as an on-ball threat. But then, Cam Johnson has also improved as a passer throughout the years, as someone who makes the right reads while moving the ball, which is something that will be highly needed by Denver in their ball movement-heavy offense. Well, on the other end of the floor, Cam Johnson is definitely not a special defender, but he's obviously grown to become better than Porter Jr. Well, for sure, MPJ deserves a ton of credit for learning how to use his 6'10" frame and the help of defenders around him to evolve into a passable defender for the Nuggets. And for sure, Cam Johnson was never really a lockdown type of guy. However, he was still able to develop into a solid team defender with quick enough feet to guard in space, and who at 6'8" with good length is also capable of defending both smaller guards and bigger wings. Combine that with all the things he does in offense, and I think Johnson's greatest strength is that he really has no glaring holes in his game. Though, on the other hand, availability is another thing that needs to be talked about, as MPJ and Cam Johnson are actually similar in a way that both of them miss a ton of games. Well, Porter Jr. has a reputation of being an often injured player, so it might come as a surprise that he actually missed only 6 games in total during the past 2 seasons. But then, a shoulder injury still rendered him ineffective for a good chunk of the 2025 playoffs. On the other hand, Cam Johnson hasn't played more than 66 games in a season, with injuries ranging from his back to his leg. But then, it's also been a few years since he played for a team contending for a championship, but who knows, if the Brooklyn Nets were title contenders last season, maybe Johnson's back injury wouldn't have stopped him from suiting up in the playoffs just as MPJ did for Denver. Nonetheless, the Nuggets will have to manage Cam Johnson's health, and if he's able to play 57 games in the regular season just as he did last year, I think with the Nuggets' newfound depth at the wing with Bruce Brown, Peyton Watson, and Christian Braun, the team should still be able to stay afloat even if Johnson misses some time. But then, the benefits in trading for Cam Johnson becomes even more glaring when you look at the financial side of things, as next season, Porter Jr. will actually make $17.3 million more than Johnson and $17.8 million more than him in 2026 to 2027. Those savings that Denver will have from trading MPJ becomes even more important when you factor in that Christian Braun is also due for a massive extension next summer that will definitely be worth more annually than the $4.9 million he'll make next season. Further, by dumping MPJ's massive contract, the Nuggets have gained access to the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which now allows them to sign a player with a contract up to $14 million as the starting salary without them having to exceed the lower luxury tax line, a much better amount than the $5.7 million they've had available to use had they not traded Porter Jr. Speaking of which, one of the biggest things that short-circuited the Nuggets' ability to get back to the top after winning the 2023 NBA title was their poor use of their taxpayer mid-level exception. Because of Denver's high payroll, that mid-level exception was Denver's only tool to add free agents making more than the minimum, and over the past 2 years, they've used that MLE to sign Reggie Jackson and Dario Saric. Well, sure, there might be some justification using the mid-level exception to sign Reggie Jackson in 2023, as the Nuggets might have simply wanted to have a veteran back after the team's championship run, especially after losing Bruce Brown to Indiana. But then I think there's no such logic for signing Dario Saric last summer. Eventually, Saric would fall out of Denver's rotation after playing just 210 minutes over 16 games for the Nuggets during the regular season. Good thing is, last week, Denver was able to unload Saric and his remaining $5.4 million contract for next season when they traded him to the Sacramento Kings for Jonas Valanciunas. Well, looking at it, Valančiūnas would have offered the best combination of experience and talent that the Denver Nuggets have had behind Nikola Jokic at the center position since JaMychal Green played for Denver from 2019 to 2021. Having Valančiūnas at the 5 would have allowed Denver to have an overqualified backup big and a solid body in the paint at all times, especially in those minutes when Jokic is on the bench. Valančiūnas also would have given Coach Adelman more options than playing Aaron Gordon at center or simply playing a returning big man Darren Holmes, who missed his entire first season with an Achilles injury. But if Valančiūnas does actually go on and sign with Panathinaikos in Europe and forgo his contract with Denver, then the impact of this move on the Nuggets' salary cap situation would actually come down to the terms of a potential buyout. And given Valanciunas' situation wherein he wants to leave Denver for a richer offer overseas, he will probably have to give back at least his entire $10.4 million salary this year to Denver in a buyout, and that should allow the Nuggets to use the full $14 million taxpayer mid-level exception below the first apron to sign another big man from the free agent market. So whether or not Valanciunas stays with Denver, acquiring him was already a win for the Nuggets in the first place, as they were able to dump the expiring contract of Dario Saric while opening up a roster spot to sign a potentially more impactful backup big man later on. But overall, the problem of finding another big man just became less pressing because of how Denver addressed their overall roster depth by acquiring 2 more veterans this offseason. First, in Bruce Brown, Denver is getting back a player who's already won a championship alongside Jokic, Murray, and Aaron Gordon, who will definitely contribute right in with his cutting and defensive energy, and who could also give the team another secondary playmaker who could run the point when Murray is on the bench, especially with Russell Westbrook gone. And while Brown isn't a reliable outside shooter, that becomes less of a problem with the acquisition of Tim Hardaway Jr., who is a reliable three-point shooting threat. In the past playoffs, the OKC Thunder effectively dared Denver's role players to shoot three-pointers, and it was incredible how Denver was actually able to take OKC to 7 games despite the Nuggets shooting just 31.5% from deep in that second-round series. But now, adding Hardaway Jr. gives Denver a career 36% three-point shooter who's not shy of pulling the trigger. Last season in Detroit, Hardaway Jr. shot almost 37% from deep while attempting 10.1 three-pointers per 100 possessions. So he should be a huge addition to this Denver team who last season didn't have any other players outside of Jokic, Murray, and MPJ to attempt more than 6 three-pointers per 100 possessions. While obviously, Nikola Jokic will still be one of the highest usage players in the NBA because Denver needs him to be that for them to win a ton of games. But with the influx of offensive firepower that they gained in the offseason, the Nuggets now shouldn't have to overburden Jokic to a degree that should wear him down even before the playoffs begin. Also, with less pressure resting on his shoulders and with more floor spacing around him, Jamal Murray should now be able to excel in a more free-flowing offense in a way that his shots can come from a number of angles based on who's on the court with him. In effect, Denver lost 2 members of last season's playoff rotation in MPJ and Russell Westbrook, but they've added at least 3 rotation caliber players, which should now allow Denver to have a consistent 9 to 10 man rotation, with Cam Johnson joining the starting lineup and with a solid bench consisting of Bruce Brown, Hardaway Jr., Peyton Watson, possibly Valančiūnas, and maybe another youngster like Julian Strawther who's primed to make another leap next season. It might be way too soon to call the return of the Denver Nuggets to the conference finals, especially after the Western Conference just got way tougher. But the Nuggets came far closer than any team in the West to knocking the OKC Thunder off their championship path during the last playoffs. And now, based on how things went this offseason, it seems like this franchise is finally doing their best to maximize the prime of Nikola Jokic to help increase the team's chances of winning a second championship. But are the Denver Nuggets really the biggest threat to the OKC Thunder next season? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments section below, and again, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this has been Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.